If you've been going to the gym for months, maybe even years, and you still don't have the body you want, there's a very good chance you're not just doing things wrong. You're focusing on the wrong things entirely, and most people are wasting about 80% of the time in the gym, and most of the fitness content online is actively making that worse. Not because the content is wrong, but because it's pointing at the things that sound interesting rather than the things that actually matter. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what that 80% is, what the 20% that actually builds a physique looks like, and what to actually do with that so you stop going around in circles. Because I've been a personal trainer for 11 years and trained myself for over 14. And the clearest way I can show you what I mean starts with the loop I see almost every new client is stuck in before they come to me. And to explain the 80% problem, I need to describe something that's probably going to sound very familiar. Because when I first started training at 16 years old, it felt like there was always something new to figure out. Is this the right split? Am I doing enough volume? Should I change my exercises? Do I need different supplements? And every time I found an answer, it created 3 more questions. And I'm someone who asks a lot of questions anyway, so that didn't help. And I spent more time researching training than actually training itself. And yes, I made some progress, but I could have made a lot more progress in the first few years because of it. I remember spending my entire evening looking online whether I should be incline pressing at 30 degrees or 45 degrees to build my upper chest better, and then going to the gym the next day and benching the same weight I'd been stuck on for the last few months. The information felt like I was making progress, but it wasn't. And judging by almost every client who comes to me, having trained for 6 months or 12 months or even longer, without the result they want, most people are stuck in exactly the same loop. And here's why. The fitness industry doesn't make money from simplicity. Simple doesn't sell supplements. Simple doesn't keep you clicking on the videos. And I'll hold my hands up and say I'm part of that problem. So the content that gets made is almost always about the tiny details, the optimal angles, the perfect protocol, rather than the boring things that actually drive results. And because that stuff looks like useful information, people consume it. They feel like they're making progress by learning. And again, I'm definitely someone who falls into this trap as well. Some might call it procrastination. And then they go to the gym and repeat exactly what they were doing before because the fundamental things haven't changed. For example, my client here came to me with more fitness knowledge than most people I've ever coached. You could have a genuinely intelligent conversation about training splits, progressive overload, optimal rep ranges, and he hadn't changed his physique in over a year of consistent training. Although within around 12 weeks of just doing the basics properly, he made way more progress than in the previous 12 months where he'd been training but doing way more researching the right way to do things and the perfect way to train in the gym. The knowledge was never the problem. The execution of it was. And everything I'm about to cover in this video is built in the Softer Lean program in the description. It's the 20% that actually matters, structured from day one, built for people who don't want to spend hours in the gym. And here's what 80% actually looks like. And I can guarantee at least one of these is where the majority of your time and energy is going. So the first one is workout splits. People jump from program to program thinking that's the answer. Push-pull legs to upper-lower to full body and all the way back around again. And I did this myself for years, so trust me, I know how it feels. I was convinced that the right split was the thing I hadn't found yet. But your training split isn't the problem, for the most part anyway. Sometimes it is a little bit. But the problem is you're not sticking with anything long enough to actually progress. The 3-session structure I use myself is 3 full body sessions a week. It works not because it's the optimal split, although I think it is for the majority of people, but the actual main reason it works is because it's simple enough to actually sustain for long enough to produce the result. And for most people, myself included, it fits around a life where you don't want training to take over your life completely, especially if you've got a busy job, you've got kids, you've got a social life, etc. The next one is perfect exercises and angles. For example, it's that 30 degrees versus 45 degree incline debate, the optimal angle for lateral raises, the exact grip width for maximum bicep activation on a curl. Meanwhile, the weight on the bar or those movements hasn't moved in over 6 months. Your muscles don't care about the perfect angle. They care about increasing tension and intensity over time. I wasted years on this, and the people whose physiques I wanted weren't doing that. They were just progressively overloading, getting stronger on a handful of movements, and doing it every week. The next one is volume obsession. Is it 10 sets per muscle? 15? 20? I've had clients come to me with spreadsheets tracking weekly volume per muscle group who couldn't tell me what they lifted in the last session. It's the wrong question entirely. A few genuine hard sets, in other words, the intensity being high, done consistently consistently and progressed over time is more than enough for most people. And the next one, which I can guarantee is something which takes over your life, or at least has done at one point, and I've been there as well, which are supplements. Supplements are the last 5%, but most people treat them like they're the first step. For example, my client here came to me spending more per month on supplements than most people spend on food, and still missing his protein target almost every day. The basics weren't sorted, and no supplement was going to fix that. Moving on to the next one, which is over-consuming content. This is the big one, and yes, I'm aware of the irony saying that in a YouTube video, but you don't need more information for the most part. You need more execution. At some point, and most people hit this point long before they realise it, watching more videos is actively the thing holding you back, because every new video creates the feeling of progression without any of the actual thing. So in other words, do the thing. So if that's the 80%, here's the 20% that actually drives results. And I want to be upfront about how unexciting this list is going to sound, because that's genuinely the point. Progressive overload, get stronger over time, more weight, more reps, better control. It doesn't matter how it shows up, as long as the numbers in your training logbook, however you're doing that, are consistently going in the right direction. If the weight you're lifting hasn't moved in months, or the rep ranges hasn't changed, or the sets, your physique won't have either. And this is what separates people who make progress from people who just show up in the gym every week. And the 3-session structure I use works because the progressive overload is tracked every session, not estimated, not roughly remembered what you did last week, actually written down and beaten next time in some way, shape or form. And partnered with training hard enough, in other words intensity, you need to give your body a reason to change. And that means pushing close to failure on the majority of your work and sets, rather than just going through the motions. For example, my client here, Cash, had been training consistently for years before he came to me. A few sessions a week, showing up most weeks, he never missed, but he was using the same weight with the same reps, and he was getting the same results. And naturally that gets quite frustrating. But once we actually tracked everything, we did an assessment week, as I do with all of my clients when he first came on board. We understood exactly what his nutrition was, I understood exactly what he was doing in his sessions, and then we tweaked things. And once we applied progressive overload, which was tracked, and the intensity was pushed properly with proper form, his body started responding in a way it hadn't done in years. And he was someone who was 39 as well. So if you're watching this in your 40s or even 50s, this still applies to you, even if you're not 18 or 19 or 20 anymore, with not quite the same levels of testosterone. It was the same time spent in the gym, just the right things actually being done in that time. Next one is recovery. If you're not recovering, you're not progressing, which is exactly why most people aren't moving as fast as they could be. I know it's cliche, but enough sleep, managed fatigue, and not doing more than your body can adapt to between sessions. I'm definitely someone where if I start enjoying a training split or start enjoying something new like jiu-jitsu, I end up wanting to do it 3, 4, 5 times per week. But then I find out I get some injuries, I get some niggles, and then it sets me back a few weeks, and it's just not ideal. So we need to be realistic about what our bodies can actually adapt to. The sleep side was the last thing I took seriously myself a good few years ago, and it made a noticeable difference to how my training felt within just a couple of weeks, really. Nothing dramatic, just consistently better. And in regards to nutrition, you don't need the optimal diet. You need the one you can actually sustain when the routine gets disrupted. The weeks when life gets in the way, and the weekends when everything goes slightly sideways. You're out with the lads, you've got date night with the missus, you're on holiday, the kids are ill, whatever it may be. But the majority of the time, your protein is consistently hit at every meal, and 80% of your meals are whole foods. I'm sure you've heard that before. And that leads me on to the next thing, which most people completely overlook, which is consistency over years. As I said, I've trained myself just over 14 years now in the gym, and this is the one nobody wants to hear. It doesn't take 30 days, it takes years, and the people with the physiques worth having didn't find a secret. They just didn't stop doing the thing. And the only thing that makes that possible is keeping the approach simple enough that stopping never really feels necessary, because it just works with your life. So here's the practical version, because knowing the 80-20 split is one thing, but most people leave videos like this without knowing exactly what to do next. So 3 sessions a week is what I recommend for most people. As I said, I've got the Softer Lean program in the description, which is completely built around this and is free. Full body 3 sessions a week, 1 push movement, movement, one pull movement, one lower body, and tag some arms on or some abs at the end. So most sessions are around 5 or 6 exercises. 2 to 3 working sets per exercise, taken very close to failure. Every single session you track your weight on each exercise so it goes up over time, whether that is the weight itself, or you're adding an extra set, or you're adding an extra rep. And then we need to combine that with protein at every meal. I have the same reliable breakfast every day, which is protein oat. It's convenient, it takes 2 minutes, and I eat this whether I'm trying to gain muscle in a gaining phase or I'm trying to chop body fat and I'm actually trying to get lean. And I do the same with lunch. I do mix it up sometimes, but ideally, if you want something where it completely takes the thought out of it, have the same lunch as well. Keep it high protein, higher fat, and slightly lower carb. And then dinner is flexible enough that normal social life fits around it. And here's the thing that makes all of it stick long term, which is the never miss twice rule. One missed session, one day off, one messy week is completely fine. What derails most people isn't the single bad day. It's letting that become the first of many. Miss once, get back on it the next day. It's really simple, and that's the consistency system. One of my clients here is a really good example of when all of this clicks. He was program hopping for around 4 years. He had all the supplements he thought were necessary, spending hundreds of pounds each month, trying to find the right approach which worked for him. But his physique hadn't really changed very much at all within those 4 years. So when he first came to me, he was a little bit frustrated as to why he'd spent a lot of money and put in a lot of time and effort in the gym, and he didn't know why he wasn't making progress. But after the assessment week, we stripped everything back to the just 3 things that actually matter. 3 sessions, all full body. We made sure he hit his protein targets, as well as tracking his weekend so that he wasn't completely blowing his calories when he was out. And then progressive overload tracked, meaning his weights were tracked every single week in every session. And then he sent me a message about 10 weeks in, and he just said, why didn't anyone tell me this earlier? And that's the one thing I think about most. The question worth asking isn't what else do I need to learn? It's, am I actually doing the basics consistently? Because that's almost always the real difference. Not the knowledge, but the execution of the boring stuff, done consistently for long enough to actually produce something. I wasted years doing exactly what I'm telling you to stop doing. Although the years after I stopped were worth way more than the 8 years before them. But here's what most people find once they've committed to the simple version and the basics are properly in place. There's one specific thing that determines how quickly the results show up, even when everything else is right. And most people either don't know about it or quit right before it kicks in. And I've got a video that covers exactly what that is somewhere over here, so watch it next.